His forces are already massed for an invasion of the planet Uranus.
And you want me to take it back, eh?
Can you do it, Blasto?
Is a frog's butt watertight?
I knew we could count on you, Blasto. Good luck. And remember, Uranus is on the line.
So what else is new?
Blasto for the PS1. Now I'd be lying to you if I told you that I know many people who have played Blasto themselves or regarded this game highly. In fact, this game is fairly obscure. While I was looking for a game to review for the channel, it struck me to review this game, and when I confronted friends about it, they could hardly believe what I was showing them. Blasto is a game that I fondly remember playing as a kid, though like the other titles I have played, are worse than how I remember them. Though unlike those other titles, I actually had quite a bit of fun recording footage for this review. Granted, there are things wrong with the game fundamentally, I still really enjoyed playing it. I'm not sure if it's because I'm a masochist or if I'm blinded by nostalgia, though we'll find out as we go through this review. I think. So the question stands, what in the world am I subjecting all of you to watch? Well, it's a game that was developed by Sony Interactive and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment on March 31st of 1998, or August 1st for those who live in Europe. The game came out boasting about its large 3D world, absurd humor, and Phil Hartman? I'll be completely honest with you, I had no idea who this guy was before this review. All I know is that he's a comedian that did the voice of Blasto and that this particular game was one of his last projects before he passed away. He was the voice of Blasto, one of my childhood memories. Phil Hartman, may you rest in peace as you have done well. The game starts you off with a very exciting tone, honestly. The startup menu alone is actually really engaging with the music and makes you anticipate the rest of the game. I approve. The opening cinematics offer us some insight into the story of the game. An evil alien tyrant named Bosk is seen talking with his army, preparing to take over Uranus. His plans are to cause chaos on Uranus, and he claims that there's nobody out there that can stop him. However, his plans have not gone unnoticed. Captain Blasto gets informed that he must save Uranus from Bosk's evil grasp. Leaping into action, Captain Blasto goes forth in his quest to save Uranus. So, as you could probably tell, the game's sense of humor is a bit immature, though I don't mind. If anything, I welcome immature humor. It's one of the many reasons I love games where you don't have to take anything seriously. They're just there to give you a good time. So, does the gameplay back up the humor? Honestly, it kind of does. Blasto is a third-person action platformer. The goal of each of the levels is to reach the end, though the way that's done is a bit interesting. In order to get through each of the levels, Blasto must platform his way through the map, activating switches and opening new portions of the map until he manages to open the exit. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, it is. There's not a lot to Blasto, though that doesn't mean the game isn't difficult. In fact, that's one of the only bits of information I could really find on the Wikipedia page, that the game was exceedingly difficult and a lot of players never made it to the end, much like myself. Why is this? The enemies in Blasto are to blame. As you proceed in the game, enemies will spawn and try to kill Blasto. And these enemies can range from exceedingly easy to horrifyingly difficult, to the point where the enemies will sometimes be able to one-shot Blasto. This is where a lot of the difficulty comes to play, as the game spawns enemies everywhere. A lot of you might already know that I despise enemy hordes to increase a game's difficulty, though somehow I don't get as frustrated when it comes to Blasto. Why is this? Well, it's probably because enemies typically are very easy to dispose of, and always spawn in predetermined locations at specific times, meaning that once you've gone through the motions once or twice, it becomes second nature to predict when the enemies will spawn, putting you at the advantage in those situations and relying on your skill to help you pull through certain situations. Enemies are also spread throughout the level enough to make a bit of a challenge while not becoming frustrating. At least, to me, of course. This isn't going to be the same experience for everyone, so please don't take my word so critically. That being said, how does Blasto retaliate? Well, with its blaster, or Blastomatic, as they seem to refer to it. Though, before we get into that, let's talk about how Blasto controls. Being a late PS1 game, Blasto has two forms of control. You could either play this game with analog support, or you could play with the directional pad. However, during my playthrough of Blasto, I found it better to play with the directional pad rather than the analog sticks. Blasto controls a bit like a tank. You use the left and right directions on the directional pad to make him turn left or right, and then use up to make him move forward, making for very stiff controls and causing issues with the analog support. As your analog tends to be less precise, this movement scheme just doesn't feel right with the analog sticks, which is why I would recommend the directional pad in most cases. Besides that, Blasto moves well enough for the platforming the game presents, minus a few hiccups here and there. These include finicky controls when trying to jump between two moving platforms, trying to fight enemies in enclosed areas, and having maneuvers be a little bit more risky than they should be. Mainly with its spine-breaking turn maneuver, I find that this move has caused me more trouble than it's worth. There are even moments where I'm pretty sure I shouldn't have fallen to my death, as I could have sworn I landed on the platform, yet the platform didn't seem to agree. I hate platforming. That being said, while you're platforming, you're going to find yourself fighting enemies quite a bit. Some don't spawn until you pass a specific point, grab a power-up, or activate a switch, while others will spawn the moment you reach a new area simply to mess up your day. They're everywhere, but never you fear, the Blasto-matic is here. This gun has infinite ammo, no real crosshair, though it's easy enough to use and shoot. Just have to center your camera on the target, spam your square key, and boom. They are killed. The only real problem I have with the shooting is that centering your camera on an enemy can actually be a bit of a pain. Blasto moves slowly enough so you can properly center your camera on any non-moving enemy. However, he's also very prone to get hit mercilessly by the enemy AI while turning. Though, the problem here lies with these little menaces to society. They fly around and move faster than you can turn, oftentimes moving right as you get your camera centered on them. They're frustrating and they usually spawn in pairs. They also typically do the most damage over time in comparison to the aliens you fight. If I were to give you any advice to surviving this game, it would be to absolutely abuse the quick step. This maneuver allows you to avoid enemy shots while still keeping your camera relatively focused on the enemy. It's great for sustaining low amounts of damage, especially when confronting one-shot or heavy damage dealing enemies. This helped me so much when I was recording footage for this review. Unfortunately, I failed to complete the game. Though to be fair, I don't think it's entirely my fault. The game only gives you a limited amount of lives to play the game with. 5 lives to begin with, and 3 continues that each give you 5 more lives. Chances are you're going to be burning through those lives relatively quickly. The game is very dependent on the player's ability to collect lives and beat the game. This is even apparent with the save system that doesn't respawn you with any continues or extra lives. I don't even think it gives you full health before you're thrusted into the world. This all contributes to the game's difficulty, and it can get frustrating trying to get through later levels as cheap deaths on enemy hordes become much more frequent. If you have previously played this game, you're probably wondering why I completely skipped over the Powerup System for the Blasto-matic. Well, that's probably because I don't feel like it's entirely useful. As you proceed with the game, you'll see power-ups dropped on the floor that can change the functionality of your weapon. Through what I'm aware of, the power-ups can make your weapon fully automatic, shoot heat-seeking missiles, and flame your enemies. Though the one thing I can say I use regularly with the heat-seeking missiles, as they're ultimately the best way to dispose of these little twats. Oh, right, and you also have to rescue space babes. What do? They serve as a 1-up from what I've seen. They say a line of dialogue, touch Blasto's face, disappear, and leave a 1-up where they were standing. Maybe a power-up for your gun if you're lucky. They're practically useless to me, though I'm pretty sure they serve a bigger purpose in the grand scheme of things. I don't necessarily have enough patience to deal with completing the game. Overall, I would have to say that Blasto is a bad yet somehow fun game. Through its charm, music, and voice acting, the game actually has a lot going for it. The difficulty of completing this game is quite high for players, and you will find yourself struggling to survive once you reach the further levels. Though the game is in fact buggy, and there will be a few instances of you unfairly falling to your death, I would have to say that this game is not worth going out of your way for. Though if you happen to own a copy or simply have a friend to borrow it from, it wouldn't kill you to give it a chance. I know I'm a few months late on this, but thank you all so much for 100 subscribers. Thank you all for 148 subscribers. It means so much to see how much you all support this channel. Alright, obligatory thanks out of the way. If you enjoyed this crappy video and would like to see more, I encourage you to subscribe to my channel. I also have a Facebook and Twitter, links down in the description. And if you would like to see more of my videos, might I recommend my 1001 Spikes review? Or perhaps you'd like to see my thoughts on the indie game Highlands? Your choice.